told you that missing a single pap smear could be the difference between life and death. For me, this became a very real possibility. And like so many others before me, I never thought that it would happen to me. And yet, back in April of 2024, my own results proved to be abnormal, which means that they found precancerous cells in my cervix. Precancerous cells are abnormally shaped cells that can turn into cancerous cells if not removed. In my case, I had to have a procedure called a LEAP. It is a surgical procedure also known as a loop electrosurgical excision procedure. Essentially, a doctor uses a loop that is heated by an electrical current to shave off the abnormal cells. I remember it being a very scary time for me. There was a lot of unknowns in my future. I was very afraid to plan for the future. My mother was afraid for me as well, and the rest of my family. But I did get through it. Luckily for me, the doctor was 100% successful at removing all of the abnormal cells within my cervix, and now I'm completely clear of any precancerous cells. That being said, I do have to get pap smears more often than someone who has not received any abnormal results in the past, because there is always a possibility that these abnormal cells could return in the future. So I say all this to say that being proactive in this matter is of the utmost importance, not just for me, but for you as well. I want women to take care of their health and take care of their bodies. As someone who is interested in studying medical lab technology, I will be looking into these very cells myself. I want women to understand especially how important it is to stay on top of your regular screenings and pap smears for cervical cancer, because time is of the utmost importance in this matter, and time is everything. So I want to talk further about cervical cancer, how it develops, and why it's so important to stay on top of your pap smears. I know that getting a pap smear isn't fun, they can be awkward, they can be a bit of an inconvenience at times, but I assure you it is not a waste of time. So the first thing I want you to know about cervical cancer is that it is one of the most successfully treatable cancers if caught early, which is why it's so important to stay on top of your screenings. According to cancer.gov, cervical cancer is a cancer that occurs in the cells of the cervix. The cervix is the lower, narrow end of the uterus. Cervical cancer usually develops slowly over time. Before cancer appears in the cervix, the cells of the cervix usually go through abnormal changes known as dysplasia, in which abnormal cells begin to appear in the tissue of the cervix. It's also important to note that cervical cancer that has spread is not only harder to treat, but can be deadly. For reference, the scholarly journal The Lancet states each year, more than 500,000 women across the world are diagnosed with cervical cancer, and 300,000 of those women meet their death. High-risk subtypes of the human papillomavirus, also known as HPV, are responsible for a majority of cervical cancer cases, but the disease is largely preventable. This means that you can take action before any of this occurs. So how can we prevent the formation of cervical cancer? To discuss this further, I think it's important that we understand how cervical cancer develops. And it starts because of a very common virus known as human papillomavirus. It's so common, in fact, that it is said that everyone would have HPV at least once in their lifetime and not have known because there are no symptoms. There are certain subtypes of HPV that can cause abnormal changes, which then causes cervical cancer. That is what I have referred to as precancerous cells. You may have seen ads on your television for the human papillomavirus vaccine, because there is a vaccine available for both teenagers and adults, and I urge you to also receive the vaccine. According to the scholarly journal The Lancet, volume 382, Cervical cancer is caused by the human papillomavirus infection. While most human papillomavirus infections are harmless, persistent infection with the human papillomavirus can cause cancer of the cervix. Set reminders on your calendar, schedule appointments in advance, and get the HPV vaccine. Here is the recommended screening frequency based on medical history and age. Again, being proactive is essential in this matter, because caring about your health is the most self-loving thing that you can do. Stay on top of your pap smears to prevent the progression of cervical cancer before things get worse. Cancer is deadly and can happen to anyone. And remember, HPV and cervical cancer are totally preventable. Stay on top of your pap smears and get the HPV vaccine.